bit about it. It sounds like throughout this whole story, you and your wife were step in step, every step of the journey. Like you wanted
sorry,
this,
I
and
put
she
that impression
supported
out
you,
there.
and like. So tell us about that, because with marriage, kids, and money is often, this point of contention between couples.
Right.
So tell us about that aspect. Maybe it wasn't as smooth as you made it sound.
Yeah. And I don't want to put that out there as a shiny unicorn story, because I often do that. I look at the bright side. I'm a positive guy. But going through the process of our marriage in general, Nicole and I have very, very different views on money. And I think we balance each other out quite a bit, though. And what I often do as a mistake is that I forget to speak her language. For me, I'm a numbers guy, paying off debt or hitting this net worth number or paying off the mortgage. All that means blah, 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 blah to her. But until I say, hey, if we pay off the debt, you could go part-time and not work at a job that you don't like that much as much. And she goes, oh, okay, that's cool. Hey, if we pay off the mortgage, you'd be able to stay at home full time with the kids, because I know you're really passionate about that. And that was a big deal for us. And so when I spoke in her language, that's when things would be better for us in our relationship. And when I didn't, and when I still don't today, because I forget, then that's when the money fights happen, where it's like, it's always about the numbers. Or for me, it's like, well, what do we need to do to get to this level? And I forget to empathize with her and her situation, her wants, her desires, and her realities for life. And when I do that, we have less fights. So I always have to remind myself to speak more in my wife's emotional language than in my numbers brain, because I always come up with these big concepts and they make sense in my brain. And then when they come out of my mouth, they don't, for some reason, she doesn't understand them as well as I do. I don't get that. And until I remember that's when we'll be a little happier. So yeah. And it hasn't been horrible, but I think there's been a lot of learning process from Andy along the way, because I always have grand schemes and I forget to bring my wife along fill her in to my wild ideas. But
there should be a book on that, on like love languages when it comes to like finance. Is there? There must be a book out there.
I think that there is, and I can't remember the author's name right now. But yes, correlating I've got the book right here, The 5 Love Languages, to how your spouse wants to speak about money, I think is a great concept.
Yeah. I almost think there should be like one of those, like travel guides where it basic phrases, and you're like, I want to say, let's pay off our debt. And then across the page, it's like, actually, you should say this.
A marriage translator, right?
There we go. A marriage translator.
Yes. It's so funny because we get that question a lot from the people that come to us to invest, like, hey, because we're, female kind of a brand, and we get a lot of females who come to us and say, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I want to do it, but how do I get my husband on board? And, we share our experiences and our stories. But I think that that's such an important thing to remember, is the love language, and how what is really the pain point actually is really what it is you identify the pain point. That's what you said. What are your wife's pain points when it comes to her idea of having money or not having money? And how can what you have to offer solves that problem, right?
Yeah. And also fulfilling your promises, because I would put this paying off the mortgage thing on a high pedestal. And I'll say, hey, we'll have so much more money to be able to go on more vacations or get that hot tub you've always wanted. And then when we paid off the mortgage, I had a brand new idea. I said, well, how about financial independence? That means we're going to live on even less. And I'm going to quit my job. And it's like, she's like, whoa, what are you talking about? You threw the hot tub out there. You threw more vacations out there. And and we eventually had to go to marriage counseling, because that was one of those things where it was like, all right, I'm not communicating well, and she has different desires than I do. A lot of it stemmed from me just not liking my job, honestly, and I didn't convey that well enough. And the counseling really helped us a lot. In the beginning, I was like, marriage counseling, that feels like I've just failed. I'm a failure as a husband, and that's where all the bad people go, right? And then I went for my first session, and I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. This is like a coach who's going to help us speak to each other in a better way. We're not perfect. There's no manual for this. But if you've got a third party that kind of sees how you communicate and gives you tips on how to do it better, it's awesome. And that's what we got out of marriage counseling. And it was fantastic. It's like a physical trainer that's going to help you get stronger. And that's what this person did for us. They helped us to speak to each other in a better way. I learned more empathy than I've ever learned in my life. And I learned to take my foot off the gas a little bit more and enjoy today. And she realized where my motivations came. So by partnering together and doing this, we found some great middle ground. And I would say we're both happier for it today.
Yeah. And my guess would be that if you get your marriage right, that your money will become right as well. And so it's one of those things where if you're not in the right state of mind, at home, where you now spend a lot of your time, that could have an impact, a negative impact on how much money might be rolling in the door. So my guess is that things are probably better on that front too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love that concept from The One Thing, where it's like, what can you do right now that will have like a cascading effect on all of the other goals that you have? And I love that book. I love the concept. I spoke to Jeff Woods, the podcast host, the other day, and it just made sense. Focus on your marriage and what can you do to make that fantastic so that your other problems, goals, priorities in life are that much easier. And that I really liked that. And that kudos to that book and that podcast, what they're speaking about.